Okay, we're back to discussing the psychology of quality of life, hedonic well-being, life satisfaction, eudaimonia. This is a book that was published by Springer. I'm the author of the book. My name is Joseph Sergi, and I'm a professor at Virginia Tech. Um, the book covers quite a bit of topics, um, and as you can see from the slide, the book is divided in major parts: philosophical foundations and definitions and measures. We talked about that. Consequences of happiness, we already talked about that. Objective reality and its effect on happiness, we talked about that. Subjective reality and its effect on happiness, we, well, again, the many subtopics there, and we talked about that. And also, now we are in that part of the book that focuses on life domains and their effects on happiness. And in this context, as you can see from this slide, um, much of the research in life domains and their effects on happiness focuses on things like work well-being, residential well-being, material well-being, social, family, and marital well-being, health well-being, leisure well-being, spiritual well, and so forth, as you can see from this slide. And we just the last module that we discussed was health well-being, and now this module focuses on leisure well-being. So this is what we're going to be talking about for the rest of this module. So what is leisure well-being? So what we will talk about that. So we'll answer the question, what is leisure well-being? We'll also answer the other questions, which is, does leisure well-being contribute significantly to happiness? And if so, how? And the last but not least, we'll be talking about the predictors of leisure well-being. So let's start out with definitions. What is leisure well-being? And in this context, based on the literature and quality of life and well-being research, we have at least five different definitions of what leisure well-being. The one that seems to be most popular in quality of life studies is satisfaction with leisure life. So the idea is that people do segment their experiences in different life domains, work life, family life, social life, and so forth. And one of those life domains is leisure life. And therefore, one can actually ask a person, how satisfied um, are you with your leisure life? And people would not struggle with uh, answering a question like that. And if they don't struggle with answering a question like that, which that would be reflective of the fact that people do um, segment their affective experience, their emotional experiences in a domain in which they recognize as being what you might call leisure life, at least semantically speaking. So this is again one popular definition of leisure well-being. Another definition of leisure well-being is based on certain dimensions of leisure life, and there are different studies that have looked at a variety of dimensions, and of course, linking those to subjective well-being. For example, one study conceptualized and measured leisure well-being in terms of five subconstructs. Would be the amount of fun one is having, things done with the family. That's the second one. The third one would be time to do things. A fourth one would be spare time activities. And the fifth one is recreation. So all those five subconstructs of leisure well-being and their measures were found to be significant predictors of life satisfaction. Another another study looked at um, other dimensions, And you give you an example of another study that looked at least four dimensions, such as experience of peace, experience of achievement, experience of exercise, and experience of risk. And the way these are measured, experience of peace would be things like people will endorse items such as I felt really free, I observed the scenery, I felt close to nature, I learned more about myself, I thought about my personal values. Examples of experience of achievement would be I applied my skills, I developed my skills and ability, I did things my own way. Examples of items related to experience of exercise would be I got exercise, I felt good after being physically active, and items related to the last dimension, which is experience of risk, is I encountered the unexpected, I chanced dangerous situations, I took risks. So that would sort of give you an idea of how leisure well-being is conceptualized and measured in this context by focusing on those dimensions of leisure life. Another way of conceptualizing and defining leisure well-being, and it seems to be popular at least in the travel and tourism industry, is perceived recreation quality. Perceived recreation quality. The Recreation Roundtable is a research organization created in 1989 by the nonprofit American Recreation Coalition, consisting of the leisure industry top level executives. The roundtable, the Recreation Roundtable, conceptualized leisure well-being in terms of perceived opportunities for recreation, the extent of participation in recreational activities, and satisfaction with these activities. And based on this definition of leisure well-being, the Recreation Roundtable was able to develop a specific measure, which is called the Recreation Quality Index. And it captures those dimensions. So those dimensions, a perceived opportunity in a given physical outdoor activity is measured through physical access to activities and the extent to which people have time and money to take advantage of them. The second dimension is participation in a given outdoor activity is measured through activities in which people engaged in the past year, vacations they took, and whether they plan to increase or decrease their participation next year. The third dimension is satisfaction with a given physical outdoor activity, and this is measured through people's satisfaction with the value they receive for the money that they've spent, and the quality of the services they use, and the level of activities and instructions available. So that is again a dominant conceptualization of leisure well-being that is commonly used in the recreation industry. Satisfaction with leisure life. Oh, I think we already talked. No, satisfaction with leisure time, I mean, not life. This is another definition, another conceptualization of leisure well-being. And in this context, it is leisure time in this context is defined in terms of how much control people have over their spare time, i.e., discretionary time. Discretionary time is operationalized as the amount of time remaining after the time people strictly need to devote to paid labor, unpaid household labor, and personal care. So again, this is another definition of that. Satisfaction with a specific leisure event. Again, those researchers that focus on specific leisure events, they capture leisure time as satisfaction with that particular event. And an example of survey items that would capture that would be, I'm satisfied with the quality of whatever the event is, like the show. I'm satisfied with the whatever it is, performance, that kind of thing. So we want to move along to this second question, which is, does leisure well-being contribute significantly to happiness, and if so, how? Well, there's literally a flood of evidence, um, demonstrating that indeed leisure well-being does indeed contribute to subjective well-being in a big way, actually. So there's plenty of evidence to suggest that this is the case. Now, the challenge is to be able to explain why leisure well-being, uh, plays an important role in subjective well-being or personal happiness. And as you can see from this slide, there's a whole bunch of different theories that have been introduced in the research literature on leisure well-being that that tries to explain the link between leisure well-being and life satisfaction. One is physiology and genetics. Another one is social motivation, affectance motivation, intrinsic motivation and flow, telic versus paratelic states, sensation seeking, activity, and bottom up spillover. Okay, let's start out with physiology and genetics. Physiology and genetics. Again, certain leisure activities such as listening to music produce immediate positive affect based on an innate responses. Similarly, engaging in leisure activities involving strenuous exercise, for example, vigorous sports, stimulates the endorphins, which activate certain brain cells that give rise to positive emotions. Positive social interactions with friends and loved ones are accompanied by physiological responses such as smiling faces, friendly voices, and other physiologically based responses. In other words, certain leisure activities are innately wired in humans to elicit positive affect. Okay, the second theory is social motivation. Many forms of leisure activities involve social interactions that result in satisfaction of a variety of social needs. Examples of social needs include the need for social approval, affiliation, belongingness, social status, social recognition, cooperation, competition, and altruism. And many leisure activities, such as watching a movie, a drama, playing tennis, engaging in team sports, getting together with others in church or social clubs. All of these serve to meet social needs. The third theory is what we call effectance motivation. Leisure, leisure satisfaction contributes to happiness through the satisfaction of effectance, or sometimes we call it efficacy needs. Um, Let me give you an example of a study that looked at effectance or efficacy needs. This study reported enjoyment activities correlated highly with reported ability. Again, the focus is on ability for all activities. So when people feel good at mastering a specific activity, they, in essence, they be able to demonstrate their efficacy, and that contributes significantly to um, subjective well-being. Another theory deals with intrinsic motivation and flow. Intrinsic motivation refers to the tendency to engage in an activity for its own sake. In other words, people find pleasure to engage in activities because of certain intrinsic values inherent in these activities. For example, children spend hours daily in play. They they do it not to get recognized and gain social approval. They do so because they are intrinsically motivated to play. Um, and part of the intrinsic motivation aspect is is people experience a sense of flow, and a sense of flow is when you lose track of time, when you have a high level of concentration in the activity, when you forget you personal problems, when you become fully involved. That's a sense of flow. And there's much research out there uh, that suggests that people who experience flow also experience a high level of subjective well-being, meaning that the flow experience contributes to subjective well-being. Okay, moving right along to uh, looking at telic versus paratelic states. We engage in leisure activities to pursue certain goals. Sometimes those goals refer to telic states. Other times we engage in leisure because we seek relaxation or excitement. These are paratelic states. Four, let me give you an example of a study that looked into this. This study looked at 36 activities and found that most paratelic activities, these are the least purposeful, where playing computer games, going to movies, having or attending parties, going to pubs, listening to music, getting together with friends, fishing, eating out, and traveling on holidays. In contrast, the most telic meaning the purposeful activities, where reading and studying, collecting for charity, engaging in political activities, engaging in religious activities, engaging in voluntary work, engaging in do it yourself activities, gardening, and taking evening classes. Compared to telic activities, paratelic activities were found to reflect social needs, involve less skill and challenge, and seem to be more enjoyable. Okay. Sensation seeking, that's another theory. And that is, some people engage in leisure activities for sensation seeking purposes. Examples of such activities would include whitewater rafting, racing, parachute jumping, hand gliding, bungee jumping, among others. How about activity theory? Much research has shown that the greater the frequency of participation in leisure activities, the emphasis is activity, the greater the subjective well-being. This, again, this is explained through activity theory, which says that activities tend to make people feel alive and well. Activities make people feel useful and productive. Through activities, people experience rewards of all kinds, social rewards, a sense of recognition, and in some cases, monetary rewards. Okay, the last theory that explains the link between leisure well-being and subjective well-being is the bottom-up spillover. And my colleagues and I, use this theory in a leisure well-being context. Let me explain. So we developed a conceptual model that captures the relationship among satisfaction with various aspects of tourism, leisure, and overall life. And the model shows that life satisfaction is very much uh, influenced by leisure satisfaction, and leisure satisfaction is influenced by leisure satisfaction away from home, and leisure satisfaction away from home is influenced by leisure satisfaction with travel services, and and the latter, which is leisure satisfaction with travel services, like, was further decomposed that and was able to were able to demonstrate that leisure satisfaction with travel pre-trip services contribute to, again, account for variance in leisure satisfaction with travel services, as well as leisure satisfaction with travel trip route services, as well as leisure satisfaction with travel destination services. So you notice that um, the very concrete aspects of leisure satisfaction with specific aspects of travel services, as in pre-trip, uh, 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 trip route, as well as those services that are administered at the destination site. All of these contribute from a very concrete to a further abstract level of leisure satisfaction with travel services at large. And furthermore, abstractly, it goes up the satisfaction hierarchy, leisure satisfaction away from home, going further up to leisure satisfaction in general, in terms of the whole domain at large, and that spills over to life satisfaction. Okay, well, that concludes our discussion on all the theories dealing with leisure well-being and how they contribute to life satisfaction. Let's now focus on the predictors of leisure well-being, and, and, and review the studies that have looked at the antecedent factors or predictors, or what you might call determinants of leisure well-being. And much of that research can be divided in terms of four categories of factors: activity factors, time factors, personality factors, and situational factors. Okay, let's focus on activity factors. Activity factors, we're looking at things such as studies have looked at travel and tourism. When people travel and they go to tourist destination, that kind of activity definitely is shown to lead to subjective to leisure well-being and ultimately subjective well-being. When people engage in when they participate in physical leisure activities, that contributes to leisure well-being and ultimately subjective well-being. Same thing can be said with social leisure activities. Participating in social leisure activities contributes significant leisure well-being as well as subjective well-being. Active socializing. Now, there's one study that kind of decomposed the leisure activities in terms of active socializing and going out versus visiting cultural events versus family and home activities. And let me read a few statements about the findings. So when it comes to active socializing and going out, the study found that men who are between the ages of 31 and 60 who frequently engage in these activities also report high level of subjective well-being. And women between the ages of 18 and 60 who engage in these activities more frequently report higher levels of subjective well-being. Looking at visiting cultural events, older people, 30 plus, who participate in this type of leisure activities report higher levels of well-being. And the third category of leisure activities, which is family and home activities, the study showed that the high frequency of participation in these activities predicts subjective well-being for both men and women across all age categories. So it sort of gives you an idea of what those activity factors might be. Of course, these are just example of activity factors. Again, we're not dealing with a comprehensive list by any means. The second category of factor would be time factors. And again, studies have shown that spending time with significant others contributes highly to leisure well-being and ultimately subjective well-being. Another study that focused on free time management, and in this context, the idea of how people manage their free time. And for those people who are effective in the way they manage their free time, tend to experience higher level of leisure well-being and ultimately subjective well-being. Okay, moving right along to personality factors. This is something that my colleagues and I have done. We looked at this personality, or what you might call individual difference um, variable, which is distinguishes between what we call allocentrics and psychocentrics. Psychocentrics are travelers who are self-inhibited and non-adventuresome on vacation. Allocentrics, on the other hand, are those who enjoy trying a wide variety of pursuits and challenges while on a vacation. Our study showed that um, allocentric travelers are much more likely to be satisfied with the destination services, travel services in general, trip services, perceive freedom from control, perceive freedom from work, involvement, arousal, mastery, leisure experience at home, and ultimately leisure life in general. So, that research showed that allocentric are likely to experience a high level of subjective well-being on a vacation than psychocentrics. Okay, how about situational factors like taking a vacation? Well, taking a vacation, I remember, one particular study that looked at taking a vacation, the extent to which taking a vacation contributes to leisure well-being and subjective well-being, and found that that's not the case. It is anticipating, it's the planning that goes into taking the vacation that really elevates subjective well-being, but not necessarily while people go on a vacation that their sense of subjective well-being is increases, which is kind of a very intriguing study. Another type of situational factors would be access to cultural amenities. Like, what are those cultural amenities? Would be things like jazz music concerts, classical music, classical music concerts, opera, ballet, theater, museums, rock concerts, disco dance, painting, painting exhibits, watching competitive sports, cinema, and poetry reading sessions. You know, having access to those situations again tend to contribute to leisure well-being and ultimately subjective well-being. Okay, well, this sort of gives you an idea of what, you know, a sample of representative what you call predictors of leisure well-being that are linked to subjective well-being. And this discussion uh, concludes this module, the module on leisure well-being, and we'll stop here.